Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into this roundtable today, hosted by Sprout Social. I'm Gregor Kiski. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a social media strategist on Sprout's own social team. We're so excited to dive into today's conversation about going behind the posts of social teams at well-known brands. In just a moment, I'm going to bring on some amazing, esteemed social marketers onto this virtual stage with me. But first, I want to highlight a new report packed with data that will help ground not only today's conversation, but two others in the coming weeks hosted by Sprout as part of a 3-episode series. Our recently released 2024 Social Media Productivity Report data helps us unpack what separates the most effective social teams from the rest and how you can prepare for the growing demands of social media management, not only now, but also into the future. This report is available for free and we'll be referencing some data points during today's conversation. And I highly encourage you to download your own copy at any point. We'll be dropping a link to the report in the comments throughout this live stream today. So with that, I'm very excited to welcome two amazing social marketers to join me for our discussion today. Greg Leong-Matern, Marketing Solutions Account Executive with LinkedIn, and Alex Howell, Social Media Lead from Notion. Welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so pumped.
Thank you so much for having us. Happy to be here.
Oh my gosh. I am literally so excited. I love, obviously, LinkedIn. I am there every day as a social practitioner. I love Notion. And so I am super excited for the conversation today. I feel like to get things started and to warm our viewers up to who will be on this virtual stage, why don't we do some quick introductions and start with you, Alex?
Yeah, sounds great. Well, I mean, the feeling is mutual. I use Sprout all the time, and obviously I'm in LinkedIn every day. So hi, everyone. I'm super happy to be here. I'm Alex. I lead social media at Notion, which is a connected workspace suite for your docs, projects, wiki, powered by AI. I work across all parts of our team, including product, brand recruiting, et cetera, to tell Notion's story across all of our channels. And day to day, I like to say that I'm part strategist and part creative and full chaos.
I love that. Hi, everybody. As Greg number 1 said, I'm Greg number 2, Greg Leong-Matern. Equally as flattered to be here. You guys Sprout is actually a client of mine, so this is a nice full circle moment. But again, I am an account executive here within our marketing solutions business. So I help a wide array of clients, B2B, tech, SaaS, everything under the sun with their digital and paid social strategies.
Amazing. And yes, it is the gaggle of Gregs today. Sorry, Alex. But I can already tell this is going to be such a valuable conversation. Honestly, yes, for our viewers, but even for myself as a social marketer. And so I would love to get started with, we'll call it an icebreaker of sorts. But one thing that we did to make today's conversation a little bit more social first, we asked Sprout's own LinkedIn audience through a poll as to where some social marketers spend the majority of their day-to-day. And here they told us content creation and strategy planning are their main daily blocks of work. However, but if you check out the comments, there are some entertaining and some very real answers about how all of these feel at unpredictable times, blocks that they feel they're juggling at any given time. So I don't know about you two, but #mood for me. And so where I want to focus our question for the three of us is how your day-to-day has maybe changed over the years working in social. I know for me, when I first started, so I've worked now agency, contract, nonprofit, association. I'm in B2B now. I've run the gamut, right? So when I first started in social, it was more high volume social calendars. So at least one post a day across all channels. We were building a monthly calendar in that same volume repeatedly. And then things shifted a little bit more reactive planning and riding the wave in more of the short term. So trends across different platforms that brands or social teams were hopping onto. And now I kind of feel the social pendulum has swung where I'm growing my group of collaborators or partners on various pieces of content with more intention, higher expected impact. And these partners and collaborators often sit outside of the social team and sometimes even outside of marketing. And I think the planning runway for those efforts have been growing longer and longer. And so, Alex, what about you? How are you thinking things have changed over the years for you?
Yeah, I mean, I started on the more social support end, right? So more on the community engagement and reactive kind of like one-off conversations with users. So, which I highly recommend for anyone in social marketing is to make time for that still. But, started there, and that was back when Notion was, our release cadence was much lower. And so we didn't have as much to say on social media. And then, like you said, the kind of like volume shifts depending on what your team needs. And so, now we're at a place where we're posting 2 to 3 times every day, not because we're trying to match a cadence, but because there's simply so much to say and to announce and to get out there into the world. But at the same time, similar to what you were saying, Greg, is the planning runway has also gotten longer because we want to make sure everything feels really social native and that we're getting to the right audience and the right target. So yeah, I think everything's shifting a little bit earlier and earlier in terms of like spending more time on the planning and then a little bit less time on like what happens as you get to the post date and what happens after.
I love that perspective. Greg, how about from you?
So interesting. I have a little bit of an opposite perspective. In my previous roles, a lot of it was strategic planning, big planning cycles, putting together a lot of decks and recommendations and things like that. And now that I've moved into this role at LinkedIn for the past couple of years, it's a lot of testing and learning, a lot of data analysis. It's everything on, how is this proving out our KPIs? How are we pacing to hit goals? So a lot of the conversation has really resonated around, are we hitting our goals with our paid social efforts and really making sure we're pacing to all those objectives that we laid out at the onset.
That is so interesting. And I think just the fact that we have different experiences, even currently, just shows the vastness of the social landscape. So let's get a little bit deeper about what goes into effective social campaigns. So I think we mentioned a few of these. We know long form video is continuously on the rise. Influencer marketing and the creator economy is booming. Ignoring social care, as you alluded to, Alex, in 2024 means turning away a large portion of your audience on social. And with all of this, crafting those social campaigns that both resonate with your audience, but also achieves desired impact has become harder. So don't think that I was going to start things off easy for the both of you. Let's start with the tough question. And so the question I want to ask us is, if we could boil down being effective as a social practitioner or team in 2024 into prioritizing just one thing, what would that be? So I will go first and give you all just a moment to think. But I think, and Alex, I believe you alluded to this, talking about social native, but I think you have to ensure your strategy is truly social first. And what does this mean? Yes, first, it means matching features to each platform. So if you're trying to get audience insights on LinkedIn, it's using a LinkedIn poll. If you have some lo-fi video content, using Reels and TikTok and maybe some trending audio there. If you are into recruitment, LinkedIn can be a huge space for highlighting employer brand. So yes, that's part of what social first means. But I think the other thing beyond that is serving as an educator to others within your organization about what social first entails as the landscape keeps evolving and shifting. And coming from a solutions-oriented lens with those internal partners, we probably don't experience this in the organizations now, but in past lives, I had to say, no, we can't post this. And without that solutions oriented feel and lens, it becomes a little like, we can't do this, period. So with social first, it's like, no, what is the impact that you're trying to reach? Okay, here's a little bit more planning that would allow us these assets specifically for these channels, and being more of that educator beyond just the marketing org on your team. So Greg, I'd be curious how you would approach this question.
Yeah, you actually, with everything that you just laid out, with how much there is to prioritize, I feel as though there's one clear answer, and that is prioritization. I think a lot of the clients that I work with have come to me and outline so many things that they want to do. And what I try to boil down to and try to slice and dice into is, what is our primary objective? What is our primary goal? At the end of the day, how are we measuring success? And then from there, we can kind of back into all the other secondary and tertiary goals that we still find important, but at the end of the day, aren't necessarily measuring the success of our business against. So definitely prioritizing what's our main goal here, what are we trying to do, and then trying to retrofit everything else, which I know is a little bit more harder of a task than that it claims to be, but starting at the onset and really identifying that one primary KPI, and then kind of going from there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that like doing that prep work ahead of time is just gonna like save you so much down the road and lead to better results. So I totally agree. I love to remind myself like do less, do it better. I would say my North Star from the campaign angle for social is to know what your users care about. I think it's a classic pitfall for a lot of people, but especially marketers, to assume that you care about the same things that your users care about. And a lot of people will build campaigns around what they internally are like, this is important, or like, this is what the message is. But that's not true. And so I think you have to remind yourself how to like tailor your messaging, or how to get people to do what you want to do, but in a way that feels natural for them. And so it's the same thing with content, and planning content for a social campaign is to think about, well, why would they do the CTA, or why would they follow your channel, or why would they be excited about your social post? And I think like a beautiful North Star, like dream goal is like, you want people to come back to your profile if they missed a social post. That is like when you've succeeded and you've gotten people really hooked on your campaign. So I would say that, make sure that your campaigns feel like they're almost like a one-on-one conversation between your user and your brand. That's how aligned you want to be in terms of what they want to see.
I love that. I love prioritization. I think that is something that is easy to say, but harder to do, as you noted, Greg. But Alex, I love the call about one-to-one, because I think we can have large audiences as brands, but as I have looked in the comment sections across platforms, across networks, the best and like hearty interactions are when a brand and a consumer or audience member have that one-to-one interaction. And I think social can still be a very powerful place for that. So very magical. Love all of that. So one thing that I feel I personally miss on case studies, newsletters, is really unpacking effective social campaign. And so, Greg, I'm going to start with you in just a second, but I wonder if you could share a recent successful social media initiative that was undertaken by you and your team. And I want to know, how did your team execute this initiative effectively while managing other responsibilities? And specifically, what strategies or resources were really key and instrumental to ensure the success amidst all of those competing priorities? And I imagine there might be some prioritization mentioned here.
There definitely will be. That's my big theme. And it's my personal North Star. Yes. So I work with a wide array of clients, one of them being the education vertical. So, higher education institutions throughout the states that are focused on driving enrollment for their master programs, their PhD programs, anything within that sort. And I have one client in particular who was leveraging and to drive these enrollments and applications is more of a bottom funnel goal. So how we would pair that on the LinkedIn side is our lead generation efforts and objectives. And so one of my clients was leveraging that strategy, but they were only siloing themselves to one form of content. And so our tried and true ad format here on the LinkedIn side is sponsored content. One of those is, kind of static imagery, nothing, no shade, but, just utilizing one piece against what I would call like a cold audience. So anyone who would be seeing our content for the first time, who haven't really necessarily considered that school before for continuing their education, who have spent no time on the website, et cetera. And so kind of all of these combined, they weren't seeing the best success in terms of what we would call our lead gen KPIs, lead form completion rates, cost per leads, things like that. And so one of the biggest things, and also kind of a big strategy here on the LinkedIn side, is testing and learning. And so wanted to make sure I was putting that forward to the client. So expanding into our sponsored messaging, which is that one-to-one, paid ad format that we have on the LinkedIn side, is just a more personalized experience hearing from these advertisers or these schools, but then also leveraging a retargeting audience. So capturing people that have spent time on the site, capturing people who have engaged with our content before, have seen our previous paid campaigns, et cetera. And so we leverage that instead of a single image, static plus cold audience. We leverage that sponsored messaging and retargeting with one program first. So in terms of prioritization, we wanted to pick the first program that had the most budget, was our key priority program, and we actually saw incredible success. And so we started rolling that out across all the other programs that the school was advertising for. So started off small, didn't want to put all of our eggs in one basket, but then once we saw positive performance and seeing the good that came out of that pivot in strategy and that test, started rolling that out to all the other programs. And that's what kind of we're in the process of right now, is really scaling that to a broader strategy to help inform future fiscal planning.
That's huge. I think one of the things that I love where you just mentioned is it breaks down the stereotype of how social can impact all areas of the funnel.
Totally.
And so I very much appreciate that. We've had similar learnings at Sprout. So I think that's something that is glossed over a lot, when social can have the impact as it relates to the revenue org, as well as just lead generation in general. I love that. Alex, what about you? Take us deeper into something you've done.
Yeah. I do want to quickly address, Greg, your attitude towards like experimentation and using social for that. Like, I think that it's often an underrated or like something they don't think about. But like even on our team, we're like, before we turn it into a full-fledged campaign, maybe we test out some of the core brand messaging as like a text-only tweet. Or it's like, maybe if the product marketing team is going to send out a bunch of emails, like demand gen emails, like maybe we test out the headlines again, or like on our Instagram story. Like I do think people aren't creative enough with their experimentation or using social enough. So I love that you called out, starting small, knowing it works, and then rolling it out across the entire channel. For us, something we did recently was launch an entirely new product, right? So we have Notion, which is like the workspace suite, and then we launched Notion Calendar in January of this year. And so it's a completely separate app from Notion, and it's our first foray into like being multi-product. The brief that the social team got from our product marketers was just to get the most attention possible. Like, we don't really care about anything other than top level awareness, which was, again, in terms of prioritization, it was really nice to have that single anchor so we knew exactly what we were building around. We had a launch day hero video that our creative team put together, and that was going out on the 17th, which was launch day. We chose it partially because the Apple native emoji has a 17 on it, so it was a nice little tie-in. And what we decided to do was just to do like a B2C hype campaign. So we took a lot of approaches from, like entertainment marketing and things that we know and saw had worked for an audience of B2C, users before. We wiped our entire Instagram account. It was all archived. And then we just did this like really fun Photoshop countdown. So we found a bunch of images that had white blank walls or white squares, and we Photoshopped the calendar numbers and kind of like turned it into a big, like if you scroll through the feed, it looked like a calendar, right? 1 through 17. And so, I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing a 17-day countdown. It was really long. There were a lot of learnings. Around day 8, we started seeing a shift in sentiment towards frustration because they were like, what could it possibly be? But people came back, day after day, and they still commented, even if the comments were not positive. And then on launch day, we saw, over 1 million views across 4 channels. We had our most viewed Instagram post ever. And we also, even though it wasn't a goal we were targeting, we got 500,000 signups for the calendar in the first 24 hours. So it worked, and we trusted our instincts on that. And I do want to call out that for our B2B audience that we cared a lot about, we had an added layer on top of this, which was we had prepped copy and talking points for our salespeople, our execs, so they could share the same social post, but add their own spin on top of it to make it relevant to the B2B audience.
Love that. Sounds like employee advocacy. We love her. I even picked up on the exact voice and how you leverage that. I thought that was so savvy. But also both of those, what you just mapped out and what Greg highlighted, were lessons that you learned building the plane, right? And that you were able to either pivot currently and be able to scale for other projects, or Alex, in your case, okay, maybe a 17-day countdown, we'll learn for the next release. And so I love the agility and observations that are taken as we're building the work too. I think that's so key in terms of successful efforts. One of the things that we've done at Sprout that has been relatively successful is building an influencer and creator program. And so if you're thinking in the B2B space, that can't be exciting, it can't be riveting, it's not something that we see all the time. Exactly. And so we've really partnered across all platforms, specifically on LinkedIn, especially this first quarter, with various influencers and creators, both in marketing, but also in other verticals that we're looking to expand into the market for Sprout. And so as a result of that, it's been our number one lead driver. So talk about leads being a social function and KPI that we can look to, but also it's generated an additional, I think, 26% to our impressions for Q1 alone. And it's just been super lovely to see. It's wonderful to partner with those folks. And again, it shows that we can take things to B2B with inspiration from B2C and making it fit for our market. So I love all of those. I think one thing that I would love us to focus on now is the impact on customer experience and brand reputation. Look again at the data from our recent social media productivity report. What we found is nearly half of social marketers feel that they sometimes or rarely have enough time to respond to customers. So at the same time, though, from our 2023 index last fall, we know that the number one thing a brand can do to be memorable to its audiences is to be responsive. So we're finding it hard to do as social teams the number one thing our audience and consumers want us to do. So let's unpack that a little bit. How do we ensure our organization maintains a high level of responsiveness to audience inquiries, mentions, etc.? And what steps can we take to minimize the opportunity costs associated with missing all of those engagements and interactions, especially considering the importance that those audiences place on brands that engage with them? Not an easy question, but Alex, what are you thinking when it comes to this?
Yeah, I don't know if this is kind of a cop-out or a non-answer, but my answer is that like customer care is very important and it should be staffed accordingly. It is a different skill set than a marketing social media manager has. The tasks are different and both are important, right? So I am almost, I hope people work in places that recognize this. You might just have to let things break, like you might just have to be like, look at how much negative brand sentiment we have because we couldn't do this. And like, maybe we need someone in seat. Like it's kind of a really not ideal way to do it. But if it gets you that resourcing in the end, then I would say, yes, take that as a win. I think as an interim, if you are alone or if you have a small team and you're just trying to make it work and cover all your bases, you just have to pick and choose your battles, right? Like who are your most high profile users? Who are the loudest people? We often say like, you need to write a good last chapter with an unhappy user, which means like you pick someone who has a really negative reaction to something and you figure out how to turn that into a positive, and they're going to redirect all of that energy into being a cheerleader for you now, right? So I would say do the most you can, but I do think the ideal is like if your team recognizes this, and hopefully the Sprout report will help with this, like make sure you have someone in the seat who's dedicated to doing this because it is a big job.
Huge. Yeah. Greg, how about you?
You guys may know what I'm going to say here, but
I was trying not to say it. I was like, I think Greg's going to say it, so I'll hold off.
It's prioritization, you guys. It's prioritization. And I love what you said, Alex, about picking and choosing your battles. And, when I say it's important to like really hone in on that number one goal and that number one objective, if that's responding to clients or if that's responding to customers, then that's what we need to focus on. And then the rest of it is understanding what can be pushed, what can be delegated, what can be deprioritized, either to the next day, next week, next month. Obviously, we want to try to do it all, but I think that might be the source of the issue, is that we are trying to do it all and all at once at the same time. So it is a matter of, what has the biggest impact on the business? We have to focus on that. And then everything else, we'll get to it. It's still a priority, but maybe not top priority. So I would say that's the biggest thing.
I love how prioritization is becoming the star of the show. Greg told you that you should be in marketing. I love that. I think both of you marry what I'm going to add on to this. I think it's having the right tools and right resources and knowing the right tools without being overwhelming or overcomplicating or over engineering. Like you want powerful tools that are simple to use, that allow you to get the right responses and interaction and social inquiries to the right teams. So I am just sometimes I can do a lot. We love that as social teams. We're nimble, but we're not always the technical expert for support or billing inquiries. And so if you can create a bridge to easily hand off those interactions, those inquiries from social to the right teams, that still keeps it personalized, timely, engaging, all of those things, that trifecta is a huge win. And one of the things that helps me personally with Sprout is the smart inbox. It takes all of those noise and messages, funnels them into one centralized place that I'm easily able to triage, find out which ones I need to address first. And so I very much appreciate all of that. And social customer care, I mean, chef's kiss in terms of like prioritizing, creating that outstanding experience for all of your audiences. Okay. Somehow time is going very fast. I wish I could freeze it a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit about time management. So I want us to look at this chart really quickly. So based on our report data, social pros are spending the most time, one, creating content and approvals, two, data analysis and reporting, and finally, strategic planning. So my first question is a little bit easy, but whether or not these hold true from your perspective, Greg, I'm curious to know if this holds true for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny. These three big pieces are candidly some of the three most important steps within an activation strategy that I help my clients through. So obviously understanding what's going to resonate the most, understanding your audience. And so kind of that encapsulates the strategic planning piece, building content for that audience through those content approvals. And then arguably the biggest thing, that I think is important here is is that data analysis, is that testing and learning, understanding what works best. You take your content that you tested against an audience. Did it work? Did it not work? Okay, great. How can we move forward? I'm a big proponent of every learning's a good learning. So whether it has more so a positive or negative impact, understanding that all the content and the strategic planning that you're putting your effort into, making sure that's paying off, whether we want to continue with the strategy, completely pivot, but making sure you're kind of always optimizing, and kind of going from there. So that completely tracks from an activation standpoint.
I love that. And for me, it would be absolutely the same as well. I think the one thing I would add, and you've just alluded to it, is that the critical piece is that these three pieces need to become a cycle. And like the importance here is like the learning that we can do based on the performance, both on individual pieces across channels, but also holistically as it relates to our particular strategy, and how we can package up those insights to allow us to be more agile and iterative as we move along, and then figuring out what makes sense to communicate what we're learning to the social team, to the rest of the organization. So how can revenue or product marketing even learn from all of these? So very much on the same page, and I love what you laid out. Alex, what about you?
Yes, I was just going to say, I think we're mind melding because all the things I wanted to say, someone was saying. I would say in terms of our stack rank of what's happening, we are more heavy on the content creation part of it, just because like I mentioned, we have a lot shipping and going out the door. And so we are spending a lot of time just making sure that gets the attention and the care it does. So when users see a new feature, they have a social post that they really enjoy. On the reporting end, I think it's exactly what both of you mentioned in terms of like, well, what are we learning and where is it going? And I think a good way to think about it is like, who is on the other end of this report, right? Who's reading this report and what are they going to do about it? And if the answer is that no one's reading the report or someone's reading the report but nothing can come of it, then you need to, borrowing from Greg, deprioritize maybe those parts, because reporting takes time, right? So you want to make sure that something happens, that it's not you screaming into the void with this beautiful report that took you hours to make. You want it to be something that's usable by the rest of your team. And so for us, it's been a lot of discovering like, well, what data does the team care about right now? And a lot of that is around user sentiment, which we use Sprout to track, user feedback. And so while we do have a lot of engagement numbers, like those actually matter less right now for specific parts of our team. And so we pick and choose what reporting happens so we can save our time to do more of the content creation and strategic planning.
I think that's so profound because it's so important. We have what matters to us in the data points, but if it's not landing or being utilized by the teams that we're creating and packaging up this data for, then it is a mess. And I feel like that's something I've had to learn as a social practitioner over the years, but it's a nice sign because that means people actually are looking at the data we're creating. And so I think it's a great moment for social. So I love that you just packaged that up, Alex. And so now I want us to similarly look at another chart from our report that highlights, though, what tasks social media managers wish they had more time for. I don't necessarily think any of us would argue that we all want more time in general, but especially for these areas. My question, though, to each of us is what would be the top thing that you think social pros or teams should make more time for in 2024 to really be the most effective and drive the most impact? And what advice do we have for them? I'll kick things off to give you a moment to spin those gears, but I would say time blocking, as simple as it is. And what I mean by that is as my week unfolds, I get pulled in so many directions. And the easiest thing that I give up sometimes is my creative inspiration or scroll across social to see what's happening in time blocks. And I think those are becoming more critical for us to be social first as organizations and brands. And then I would also say being strong to those holds, as well as leveraging AI to not be the co-pilot or to be the co-pilot, but not the driver in your effort. So how can you leverage ChatGPT or automation to do some research or find the best times to post, which would take you hours to crunch that data? So those would be some of the things that I would recommend that I'm even trying personally to hold myself more accountable to this year. How about either of you? What do you got for viewers?
I'll pop in. I would say thought leadership, but based on, i.e. employee advocacy is huge on the LinkedIn side, very hot topic. And not to say that every company needs to hop on the bandwagon. If it doesn't fit, within the overarching strategy, then deprioritize. But I would say, that employee advocacy or that thought leadership is who can we source from within to tell the story of the broader, of our broader company? How can we leverage, people within our walls to further tell that story and to achieve that impact and achieve those objectives? So I think that's going to be and is and will be one of the biggest pieces that I think brands that at least I work with are starting to make a lot more time for is what does that thought leadership or employee advocacy strategy look like? How can we bake it into our broader messaging, and going from there?
Yeah, big plus one on employee advocacy. Thinking about it, I think about it as almost like a missed opportunity if you don't do it. I would say first, though, you do need to think about fit, like Greg said. I would say if you're any type of mid-size to large-size company where you have more than 150 employees, there's probably some people who like social media and just don't work in social media proper. So those are your people that you should tap. And from then again, it feels like a missed opportunity for you to spend all this time creating a beautiful post and none of your employees share it to their networks. That is a very, less time spent, but high impact task you can do is making sure that they do that. So I would be big on that. I think the other thing that I would love more time for is just ideation. I think that, in my opinion, for something to be really creative and outstanding, something distinct from the rest of what other people are doing, you have to let an idea marinate. You have to ideate with your stakeholders, and you have to give yourself time to discard all of the first ideas that come up, because those are not the best ideas. Those are just the things that are the most obvious. So I would say that the magic of social really comes alive when you have a deep partnership that's not transactional with your stakeholders, and you give yourself time to just create something very different. So I wish I had more of that time.
I love that. I think with Greg's more prioritization, we could carve out some time for these types of things. So, Greg, I feel like we just kicked off during this live stream your influencer career. So, one, you're welcome. And two, remember us.
I'll remember you guys. I'll try.
Well, with that, I also am super sad because I could talk to you both literally for hours more, but we are somehow already out of time. And so I just want to say on behalf of our viewers, but also myself and Sprout, like, thank you, Alex and Greg, for taking the time today. This was not only wonderfully valuable, but just so insightful. And so I appreciate both of you being here and sharing your insights.
Thank
you
you
for having us. So fun.
Yes. Amazing. Thank you. And thank you to all of the viewers today. I do want to say to not forget to download your free copy of Sprout's 2024 Social Media Productivity Report. And if today's conversation intrigued you and you want to learn more about how to work smarter and make the most of your time, tune in our next conversation as part of this 3-part roundtable series. The next episode will be on Thursday, April 11th, where we'll discuss how social marketers can make more time for meaningful work. So we just got to the tip of the iceberg today. And that conversation will be joined by MJ Jordan, VP of Field and Channel Marketing for Sprout, Haley Pierce from LinkedIn's B2B Institute, and Brandon Smithrick, Head of Content at Kickstarter, as well as prominent LinkedIn creator. And so in the meantime, please feel free to drop any questions in the comment section, and Sprout, along with some of our other speakers today, will do our best to get to them, as many as we can in the coming days. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and we'll see you next time.